Mike, this is where the bopping comes in.
Yeah, you got to bop.
Mike doesn't bop. Mike doesn't need to bop. Hello, and welcome to the HR Data Labs Brown Bag Lunch. I'm your host, David Turetsky, alongside my best friend, co-host, partner in crime, Dwight Brown from Salary.com. Dwight, how are you?
I am well. How are you doing today, David?
I'm outstanding. You know why I'm outstanding, Dwight?
Tell me.
I have with us someone who he's gonna get mad at me for saying this. I looked up to this man for literally at least a decade. And I don't mean just look up, because he's tall. He's taller than me.
I mean, say, you're shorter, is it?
Yeah, I'm short. Yeah, I can look up to everybody most. But this man was in the Rolodex of every single CEO and COO and CHRO in the financial services world, especially around the world, but in New York. And I don't say this lightly. When I think of compensation, and I think of compensation in the financial services world, there's two names that come to mind. Mike Curran. Genius. Well, that's three, but Mike, how are you?
I'm great. I don't think I can live up to that introduction, but I'm doing well.
So everybody who either attends or ever listens to this, and if they ever worked in the financial services world, will have heard of the legend that is Mike Curran. And when I say that, I mean that when Mike used to step into a room with financial services executives, they all became quiet for everything this man had to say. Nobody had that except for him. They'd all bark at him, yell at him. Not this guy.
I was going to say, financial services execs, quiet?
When he talked, they listened.
Yeah, like the old E.F. Hutton commercial.
Exactly. Which goes back to the financial services as well.
Right.
They were a client for a short while, and they went out of business. There's a fun story there, too, but you drive the bus, and we'll figure out where we can work some stories.
Well, Mike, why don't you give people a little bit of background as to not only that time, but also what you're doing now?
Sure. I ended up in financial services a bit by accident. I graduated in '79, and the financial services industry was banking. People didn't know what investment banking was. There were technically hedge funds, but probably no one knew what a hedge fund was.
Right.
No one knew what a private equity firm was. They sort of knew what an asset or investment management firm was. They'd heard of Fidelity or a couple of other places. And certainly they knew about insurance companies. So that's what they thought of. And I went to work for a paper company. Thought I wanted to do labor relations. Ended up working in a paper mill down in Houston. Thought, this is really horrible. I need out of here.
But that was manual work, wasn't it?
No, I wasn't doing manual work. They were. No, God.
You were doing paperwork.
So much for the Ivy League education. They give you, then put on a helmet and steel work shoes. I thought it'd be interesting to do, and I realized it wasn't, what I thought. It was not, negotiating labor contracts. It was a variety of things. It wasn't uninteresting, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I came back to New York and found an ad in the newspaper, New York Times, from a small recruiting agency. And it was for a job at Morgan Stanley. And I was like, okay, I don't even know what Morgan Stanley is. And in 1981, nobody really, there was no, there's no internet. You can't Google anybody. There was virtually no information about them anywhere. So you try and ask around and find out, what little you could about it. And I went through the interview process, and I got hired to basically be the compensation department. There was a head of comp and Ben, a head of comp, and me. And that was it. And the other two guys were executives, so they weren't going to do any of the work, and they gave me all the work. And it was a firm that was just about to take off. 2,000 people, privately held, a handful of offices in the U.S., a couple overseas. And I got to do all sorts of interesting things. I did all the expat work. I did the partner share distribution information. The first time I did that, I sent out, there were 58 managing directors, which was their term for partner. And I sent out 58 letters with their, first time they had ever done it, sent out an actual summary of their holdings. And I got 57 of them right. The one I got wrong was the CEOs. And I get a phone call, and my assistant's name was Janet. And Janet was from Brooklyn, and Janet had just a great accent. And I won't attempt to do it, but she buzzes me, and she tells me that Bob Baldwin, who was the CEO, is on the phone. I'm like, oh, this can't be good. Like, there's no reason this is going to be good. And I immediately pick up the phone and introduce, my name, and he says, Mike, this is Bob Baldwin. Like, again, I knew who it was and
right.
Whatever, but thank you. And he says, I'm looking at this sheet in front of me. I said, yes, sir. And he says, it's wrong. And I said, sorry. And he says, you'll fix that, won't you? Yes, sir. And then he hung up. And that was it. I proceeded to go home and change my clothes. And then went down to the corporate secretary and double checked the numbers. And what I had done. They had a funny kind of thing. Every year they redid the partnership, and every year they converted the preferred into. It's sort of like a common share, and they converted into a preferred share. And they had annual tranches of the preferred shares.
Right.
And I left out his current common shares and only put the preferred, so I had understated what he had.
Of course.
And not a good understatement, right?
No.
Anything wrong with the CEO is not a good idea, but
right.
It was complicated, and nothing was computerized, et cetera. So I got to do a whole range of things, international, domestic. I wrote jobs. That's why I know so much about, at the time, securities operations. I had to go interview everybody in the operations department, 400 guys.
Oh, wow.
And write their job descriptions.
Before computers, so it became very different after that.
Yeah, I did. I don't know when broadbanding officially started, but I did broadbanding in 1981 for the operations guys. So a whole range of different things. And you got to learn. Then I got transferred into the investment banking department, and I did generalist work there, and I got to understand investment banking as it was taking off, because at that point it was pretty straightforward corporate underwritings and M&A, and the occasional private placement, the occasional,
This is before the rockin' 90s, where everything
there was nothing going on.
Took off like a rocket.
This was what was in the 80s when they started doing all these things. Interest rate swaps came into play, and you had floating rate notes, and you had floating rate preferreds, that you could convert on Tuesdays but not on Thursdays. I mean, it was just there was new products coming out, certainly on a monthly basis, and sometimes it was week after week. And Morgan Stanley was a very good training ground. I mean, they sent out all that material to everybody in the investment banking division. So I got material that the associates were getting, that they would be learning what the product was, and I was getting it in HR. So I loved it. It was a great experience. Left that, went to work for McLagan Partners. They were our consultants, and spent the next 19 years there. Business got sold again to Aon. Didn't want to work for Aon. To do my best thinking in the shower. And I'm in the shower, and I say, I'm working for Aon.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I wouldn't even interview with these guys, and now I'm working for them.
Yeah.
So, if any of your listeners work for Aon, that was back when they were bad people. So this is a great.
But
place.
then you and your friends Gail and Mark.
They actually left first. Gail and Mark started MGMC, which was originally SH Consulting.
Yes.
And it turned out SH Consulting was already copyrighted. They didn't know when they had filed originally with the Secretary of State in Connecticut, so they went back and... So S&H were the first letters of their last name.
Shelton and Heastand.
So they went back and went with MG, which was Mark and Gail.
Yeah.
So it was MG Management Consulting. And
by the way,
a lot of people...
By the way, Mike, those two are also brilliant and very good friends of mine, and I used to have them on speed dial when I was at Morgan Stanley and Bankers Trust, actually.
Yeah. Well, Gail's retired. Mark's head of comp and ben at UBS and doing quite well.
Brilliant
So
person.
they were MG Management Consulting, then people just started calling it MGMC. And I was told that a lot of people in the industry thought it was Mike Gale and Mike's Coming. So,
Well, Mike Curran is the other two, yeah.
yeah, so that was not, well, actually, we officially changed it to MGMC because we had a fourth partner, Chris Favreau. So it worked out
Chris
almost
Favreau,
everybody's
yeah.
initiative.
Another brilliant
So,
person.
Anyway, we did that for a while, did very well. Towers came along, made us a proverbial offer we couldn't refuse, and then I spent the next, 7 or so years or 8 years with them afterwards. So retired in 2016, went back to school, wrote a couple books.
Wait. You can't do that. You can't just say wrote a couple books. Because they're actually pretty unbelievable books. Tell us about them.
All right. Well, very quickly. I know you got a very
we
short
want to talk,
window
but
here.
yeah.
I got a master's degree in military history. I took my thesis and turned it into a book on the French and Indian War. It's about the role of Native Americans, so it's a different look than people have seen. And then there was a very interesting character in there, and I took him and wrote a historical novel about his life. He was, as I'd like to describe him, the Forrest Gump of his time. He was everywhere. And so he was so interesting, I created a novel around him. So those are the two books.
When's the series coming out about that?
Yeah, I think the novel would make a great, it's sort of like Outlander or something like that.
There you go.
From almost the same time. Outlander starts in 1745 with the Great Rebellion and Bonnie Prince Charlie and all that stuff, and goes all the way to the Revolutionary War. And this guy's sort of like, he's French Canadian, the character, but he's sort of got some of those similarities of he's everywhere. In real life, you didn't have to have plot devices. He very literally was, which is amazing when you consider the level of transportation, which was foot or canoe, not even horseback.
Really?
The wilderness. Yeah, so amazing guy. Anyway, that's what I did, and I've been doing mostly nonprofit work, mostly in the educational space since.
Wow.
So, Mike, we ask every one of our, not that was an amazing story, but we ask every one of our guests, what's one thing that you did, the last thing you did for the first time? Sorry. Last thing you did for the first time.
Oh, last thing I did for the first time. Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned this question might be coming up, and then I thought about something and I've forgotten it. I'll tell you.
You forgot the last thing you did for the first time.
No, I'll tell you. The next thing I'm going to do that I've never done before, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to write a sex scene. So I'm taking writing classes all the time, and this writing class is based on the Modern Love series in the New York Times, which you may be familiar with, which is great stuff.
Yeah.
And most of those stories are about unique people and situations falling in love, divorce, travel.
Sure.
And I'm taking this class, and so this is the last session coming up, and she said, you have to do two things for next week. I won't say where the class is being held. She'll get fired. We have to bring in a list. We're supposed to bring in a list of names for various body parts. And then the other thing we have to do is we have to write a short love scene, but with intimacy.
Well, if you need help with either one,
I'll
call us. We'll brainstorm.
You and David said you were great friends. Send me a note. So I tried to write a love scene for my novel. I could not do it. It is
really.
I guarantee you, this is due next Wednesday. Between now and next Wednesday, I will be sweating, and not in a good way.
Call me. I got a lot of stories for you.
Yeah, well,
and an active imagination.
Read them out loud and not make them sound ridiculous is the hard part.
Never had a problem with that.
Yeah.
Never had a problem with that.
Yeah, well, good. Anyway, so we want to talk about compensation.
Yeah. So we have to do the bump music.
Is there a TikTok music video of you guys?
We'll make this entire episode into a TikTok.
Okay, that's good.
So, Mike,
leading a growing business, it's like building a plane while flying it. Team building, decision making, and scaling all at once. At CPO Playbook, we get it. That's why our podcast, ranked in the top 10% worldwide, tackles the toughest leadership challenges with insights to help you lead smarter and grow faster. Tune into the CPO Playbook podcast because leadership doesn't come with a manual, but we're pretty close.
one, obviously, we're going to have you on. We're going to talk about market data and market pricing and effective uses of market data, since you spent a lot of your career helping organizations figure out, how to actually make sure they understood the markets. Maybe that may make sense for many organizations thinking about the world of compensation and understanding how to market price. You've had a very unique perspective on it, though, especially given the fact that you had a major focus in one area.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about market pricing, and then let's get into how it's changed over time.
Sure. So market pricing, when I worked for the paper company, one of the assignments I had was doing compensation, and we participated in about 100 different surveys. And it was about 43,000 employees, all domestic U.S. And when you're in school, even if you're studying this stuff, you don't realize all these things exist. And like, how could there possibly be 100 different surveys? And the answer is, well, there were probably 500 they could have participated in, but they chose just these. So individual companies used to be big sponsors of surveys. That was definitely a thing in the 60s, 70s, into the 80s. It was not always consulting firms or associations or things like that. There were associations, and the paper industry got in a lot of trouble because they would get in a room and collude on salaries.
Really?
Yeah, they got a consent decree. They stopped doing that. But then one of the things that came out of that was an organized survey so they could get at data legally that they were exchanging illegally before. So it was a good shift.
Yeah, one would say.
Excuse me?
One would say that would be a good shift.
No, it was good.
Yeah.
It was very good. So you look at all these surveys and you realize in short order they're really mostly terribly done, and the quality of what you're getting back is extremely questionable, yet we were making decisions on it. We were making decisions on pricing individual jobs. We were making decisions on what we would set as a annual merit budget. We would make decisions on what our salary structure looked like, whether a series of benchmark jobs were priced effectively, and we had to move the scale in that time period as inflation was starting to take off upward. It was never downward, but in theory, obviously, you could shift downward as well. And we looked at geographic differentials, et cetera. So there were, and companies still, particularly in certain segments, industrial companies is a good example. I'm sure consumer and retail companies also. You do have to look at all that stuff. I mean, salary is the most important portion of the pay for the individual, and it's the most significant portion of the compensation cost of the corporation. So getting salaries right is a bigger deal by far in most industries than it is in financial services.
Right.
Even the tech industry, salaries are meaningful. It's salaries and options. But in financial services, it's salary and bonuses, and the bonuses include non-cash components and have for a long time. But the bonus is the bigger piece of it. It's the most significant thing for all your important people. So getting that right not only is a benchmarking exercise, but it's a design exercise as well. So you have a lot of things going on. Surveys were bad. Towers Perrin, which is now Willis Towers Watson, they had one of the bigger financial service industry surveys. Cole, if people worked in the banking industry back then, they would have known about Cole. Both of those had an approach which said, just give us a sampling. So most surveys were basically done on a sampling basis.
Right.
So beyond all the issues around the structure of the survey, did they get the job structures right? Were people reporting the right things into them? You had all the participants choosing what they decide to give you.
Right.
Yeah.
So they would decide, well, this is an outlier. I'm not going to submit an outlier into the survey. And for anybody who's worked in the financial services industry, you'd say, boy, everybody's an outlier.
Pretty much.
So if you don't capture the outliers, you have missed out on some of the most important aspects of what's going on in a marketplace. So it's a combination of what we were doing and how things have changed. What we started to do at McLagan moderately, and then what MGMC really did, which I think was, for sake of argument, revolutionary. It's a little strong word. But Mark and Gail said to our clients, give us everybody.
Yeah.
So we had clients that literally gave us a download from the CEO to the janitor. And we got their entire, not the payroll, we're not getting payroll system data.
Right.
We're getting HRIS data. And we got their salary and bonus and stock award information for some of these companies, 20,000, 30,000 employees. So what now becomes interesting and is still relatively unique, you could say, people would say, well, the survey is always a sample, or survey doesn't get everything right. And particularly you talk to the academics about this. Well, you can't possibly survey everybody. Well, we did.
Yep.
For many jobs, we literally had the data on everybody.
Every person
who was of any significance. So if you said in investment banking, all the major players, everybody was a top 20 kind of firm, participated, and we had all of their data. So if you said, well, we don't know what a third-year associate is going to get paid, because you can never sample the market completely, we had the whole market in every country in the world.
Well, I think there was a little bit other differentiation too, and I think it's down to sophistication. Because I remember when I used to complete those surveys, there was one thing that really set these surveys apart, which was splitting pay between next year's pay and last year's pay, bonus, and all those other components.
Sure.
So you were splitting what job someone did for their current base pay versus what their job and pay was for the performance period.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that you could accurately measure total compensation for a year rather than looking at their current base pay plus their bonus and stock that wasn't earned in the same year.
Well, that was a standard approach in a lot of surveys. So you're absolutely right. They would take the current salary and add it to the prior year's bonus. Now, over time, many organizations were paying bonuses in the following calendar year anyway. So it sort of reinforced what some of those people who were structuring surveys that way thought. Well, it's the salary for January of 2025, and it's the bonus you got paid in January 2025. So of course that's 2025 pay, even though of course they're wrong, and that bonus that was paid was for 2024 performance.
Right.
But that was the sort of the shifty little combination of it. I think it's interesting in some periods more than others. So if you have, or some markets, or some levels of staff, right?
Sure.
So if you're talking about junior people where salary is a big component, adding current salary to last year's small bonus, Christmas bonus equivalent kind of thing, maybe it was a minor difference depending on what the inflation rate was. If you talk about some countries where pay differentials between salary and bonus are more dramatic than others, you're starting to get some real distortions in doing that. I don't think it was as bad as it sounds. It wasn't good. We didn't like it. We argued against it. We argued for what we were doing.
Right.
But I don't think that, if I'm thinking about what makes a survey better or worse, I think the completeness of the sample size is probably the single biggest thing. Because if you have every data point you can possibly get, if there are some tweaks, for example, and this is another example that can exist, we don't want to spend too much time on, exchange rates.
Yeah.
So if you say, well, what did you reported your staff in Japan, what exchange rate did you use? You can get distortions in these things.
Sure.
How do you handle expats?
Times.
Definitely.
Yeah, sure. What do you do with expat packages? Well, we excluded them. But, there are people who would argue, ORC, if you remember them, would try and do an all-in analysis, including the value of an expat package. For some of them, they didn't do a lot of survey work, but they did some. So I think there's been a lot of shift there. A lot of the shift in surveys is also technological, right? So people are able to distribute materials, collect materials electronically. Things can be done much quicker, not necessarily higher quality. Depends on you still have a QA process on both the submission side and on the receipt side. But you have the opportunity to do more. Again, the idea that you could do global. When we started doing global, I went to Japan in 1988, and I sold the first survey to the Japanese-based, American and European companies. But the first survey that wasn't done in country, and they were like, "What are you doing here?"
Right, exactly.
And you're not Japanese, and we don't want to deal with you. And I said, well, no, I think it'd be a good idea. And they one of the things you learn in Japan is they say hi, which is in theory yes. What it really means is I heard you. Mm-hmm. So they go hi, and you go, oh well, I made a sale, and the answer is you didn't make a sale. You had the opportunity to make the sale, and then they'd go check with head office, and head office would say, well, no, you really need to speak to Mike. So we got that off the ground. But then we were getting everything faxed to us in the middle of the night. So, Gail and I would be sitting there at the fax machine. Someone would, because they'd be Bankers Trust. If you remember, your guy in Tokyo who died young of a heart attack, sadly, but he would want us to be at the fax machine.
Yeah,
because
we're very sensitive data. That's why.
And, so the technology was not conducive to sleeping. It was a rough way of doing things. So technology makes a world of difference. It makes.
But Mike, I think one of the other differences, because you said completeness is important. In most other industries, you can't get that completeness.
Correct.
Because the players are so vast and variable, either partially or fully in, that there are very few even close seconds to the financial services industry in terms of their insular nature, and exactly who they are. Even that these days, what constitutes an investment bank is a very interesting discussion, I imagine.
Yeah, it's certainly morphed, and the difference between an investment banker and a private equity banker is potentially very limited.
Right.
And the difference between a hedge fund trader and a trader for an investment bank or a bank is potentially very limited. So you do have those kinds of complications. It was a great industry to do this and experiment in, because people were willing to go along for, I don't mean a ride in a bad way, I mean they were willing to go along with you to try new things. Because it wasn't a hidebound industry. Again, Morgan Stanley in 1981, 2,000 people in private.
I know.
Morgan Stanley today, I don't know, 75,000 employees, global, everywhere. And all the major financial players are the same way. They're in 50 countries minimum.
And by the way, Morgan Stanley's not just an investment bank anymore. It's a financial services company.
Yeah.
Full everything. I do a lot of banking with Morgan Stanley too. So they'll pretty much take anybody.
Yeah.
They'll take you.
Morgan Stanley, in its current incarnation, is heavily the merger of Morgan Stanley with Dean Witter.
Right.
And then adding on lots of companies subsequently. But Dean Witter was one of the original one-stop shopping theories.
Yeah.
So Sears bought Dean Witter. And their internal motto, they never did an ad with this, would have been great. It was from socks to stocks.
They probably should have stayed with that.
So it was a very interesting thing. And they also had Allstate. So Sears, Allstate, and
and
Dean
then
Witter.
Discover too, didn't they?
They started Discover, yes.
Yeah.
That was Phil Purcell's
I remember Phil.
idea. He was the Sears. He was a McKinsey guy that Sears brought in to run Dean Witter.
Wow.
He came up with the Discover card. I mean, everybody's done. Lots of people have done.
Sure.
Credit cards, but he was the one who said there's room. People.
They created a fourth player.
Yeah. Well, the older members of your audience might remember there was a thing called Diners Club, which was,
of course,
I believe, the original credit card, and that was started by Citigroup.
Yeah.
And it died a relatively slow death, but it was still in existence, I believe, when Discover came out. And
it was, because my grandfather was very proud of his Diners Club card, by the way.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, Mike, I would love to have you on forever, but we have 2 minutes left.
Sure.
So, Dwight, did you have a question for Mike?
If you were with the context that you've given, where would you, if you were to very shortly say, where was benchmarking and market data before versus where is it now? How would you describe that?
Well, I wish I knew that question was coming exactly, Dwight, because I'd have come up with better analogies, like, Pleistocene era versus, or, where we are in the various dinosaur stages, or ecological, It was... So surveys really don't exist. Compensation surveys don't exist until at least the 1930s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So industrial engineering was the beginning of benchmarking.
Right.
So the Ford Motor Company basically invented industrial engineering as it relates to the way we think about job structures.
Right.
And that's where benchmarking came from. If you find any of the early literature from academics, it references back to that stuff, time motion studies, etc. So clearly that's the infancy, and we're less than, not quite 100 years into this.
Yeah.
If you think about many processes, that are as complicated as compensation actually really is. It's hard to say that, in realistic terms, 75 years of someone trying to do this for a living or trying to do this right, that you would get to the pinnacle. We're not there. So I think in 1981 it was pretty much infancy, even though people didn't realize it. And now, it's a teenager. Maybe it's
interesting.
Early college student.
Well, what I'd like to do, though, is I'd like to continue this conversation in another version of the HR Data Labs Brown Bag Lunch, if you don't mind, Mike.
Sure.
And we can go from infancy to teenager and then teenager to adult and talk about where it could go. How about that?
Great.
Mike, it is a
Love
pleasure talking to you. I always enjoy it and learn so much every time I hear from you. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here.
Great. Thanks, David.
That's
Thanks,
been
Dwight.
great. Thank you. Appreciate it, Mike.
And everybody, thank you very much for listening. Take care and stay safe.
Bye now.
Wait, don't go anywhere.
Oh, I won't go anywhere.